All right, so today we are talking about this idea that I've been noodling with for probably like 10 years at this point. Do you have to work a 5-day work week? Let me put that into context a little bit though. Not necessarily don't work 5 days in a calendar week, but how do you approach work a bit differently? So I want to dive first into how generally people approach work, right? You get them Mondays or, Monday, and then, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then you get this hope for Thursday, Friday. That's the general consensus of how a week goes. Now, let's just say you super, super duper enjoy your job. You love what you do. Mondays, you are hyped. You crush it. Generally, you expend all your energy by the time you get to Wednesday because you're just like, getting after it. And you kind of need to hurdle along Thursday, Friday, and then recover. Also a good approach. Also technically successful as well, as we've seen in society. But I think for creatives, there's a different approach, and I'll get into a little bit why, but I believe that the best sequence that a creative can realistically work in are 3-day windows. That doesn't mean 3 days a week, but could it be the 3-day work week? Yeah, theoretically it can. And I've tested this quite a bit over the years, and it's actually weirdly worked out pretty well. Yeah, I will admit it's a little bit harder to fit into the business side of things because you end up weekends and the days get kind of mixed up. But the principle of this I actually find to be really meaningful and a really good takeaway that I think everybody can learn from. So let's look at what the creative approach generally is, right? You have your creative time, meaning whatever you're creating, whether it's film, design, video, art, photography, anything in the creative realm or that deals with the creative side of the brain, could even be accounting, business, kind of creative problem solving in business. And then you have the analytical side, and then I like to call like an admin side. And so the analytical side is, how did results go? Making sure you write the technical information correct, checking sources, like just generally all the stuff that's more the analytical brain, or nowadays that you can kind of outsource to AI. But that concept that you have analytical, creative, and then I call it an admin day. So the admin day is, no, it's not just like organizing files, although that might be part of it. It's also comes down to reflecting on what worked and what didn't from a process perspective, from a product perspective, and then how do you build again better for the next cycle and prepare for the next cycle. And so I always think about it as you kind of have like an admin and analytical and preparation day, so to speak. And then you have a creative day. And the way that I could see this playing out just for a lot of people, this is how it's kind of worked for me, is let's just say very early in my career, this is probably like 10 years ago, I had a project come on my lap, and it was like a really awesome project to work on. It was a film project supported by some design, and it was one of the few times where it was like a bigger project, needed all my focus. And so I tried to kind of approach it completely differently. I was like, how can I get the best out of myself and out of the way that I work and the creativity that's required and the deliverables, being just one person too. I've worked in teams before and worked with larger teams, smaller teams, but generally like the steady state of most of it, my entire career has kind of been me doing a lot of the things. And so I kind of try to see what's the capacity of the self first before kind of moving on to more people. And so in this case, it was like, okay, how much can I take on myself? And then would I need to bring somebody else in? And this project took kind of some planning. So we had like a location that we were going to shoot in. We didn't have a lot of budget in order to do any type of location scouting or anything like that. Just kind of like the photos kind of scenario. And so it was like, okay, the planning side was like, let's make sure everything's planned correctly and actually like ready to go. So I kind of took an entire day, and was like, let's just focus on planning. Forget about emails, forget about cameras, forget about, like all of those things. Like literally just focus on the preparation for what you were going to do, very much like an athlete would, prepare for a game, a particular game. So you practice a bit, but you're also kind of analyzing, what are you going to do? How is it going to go? And visualizing it in your brain. And I think that part is probably one of the bigger parts, is like this analytical time or this preparation time. I always see that as an opportunity to really visualize how you want it to go, because it usually actually goes pretty close to that one, which is pretty cool. But visualization is a key in all this. And I always encourage people, like, kind of do it outside in nature, like get away from like the normal spot where you might be editing, working, thinking, like just that normal monotony. If you're kind of getting into a more creative mindset or preparing for that, step out of that normal space that you're in, because usually the unknown, or at least like the idea of it not being the norm, helps the brain to kind of create things a little bit out of the ordinary, which is kind of cool. I've had some of my greatest ideas just like on a run in the forest or swimming in the ocean or something like that, where it's completely unexpected. And I'm like, wow, why did I get that idea about this project? And a lot of it is because you're allowing your brain to kind of prepare for this. You're getting at the reps and you're allowing it to be creative. I think one of the things that we have in this, call it society now, is that you're kind of blocked from the creative mindset in a lot of ways. Like there's so much pressure put on the analytical side, the results side, the data, which is all important. Don't get me wrong, it's important, but there's a time for it. And then there's a time for the pure creativity where it's like, let's do something completely original. And that time has to kind of be protected, especially for creatives. And like, you want to have that freedom to kind of run around. I almost equate it to when you're a kid and you're running around and, make believe, and you're like, oh, this is now the fort over here, and we're going to go to that fort. And there's a, capture the flag now all of a sudden is happening, and then capture the flag with all these other rules that you didn't see. And it's like, those are kids just creativity coming out. And we kind of just take that away from our own mindset and our own approach to creativity. And I always encourage, like, no matter what age you are, to kind of bring that back, have a little bit of fun, creativity. Don't be so serious, like, see what happens. And so in this case, like, I kind of prepared for the creativity. Shoot day came, did the creative thing, and then came back and it was like, okay, how did the shoot go? Analyze it, look at it. Okay, cool. That was the admin day of like, okay, let's collect all the gear, let's dump the footage, let's do the things that you just kind of got to do. And then the next day was really analyzing the actual stuff itself. So like, what do we have? Do we accomplish everything we set out on to do? And is it in a format that we can kind of move forward? Now comes into the editing side of things, where editing's a little bit more, this is for video mainly, but like any type of deep creative work, whether you're designing, actually doing the writing, actually doing the painting, like that, it's the same as that creative time. You want to prepare for it and do it, but it's a little bit more predictable. Like you kind of have like a day that you're going to say, hey, I'm going to do this. And then the next day I'm going to, analyze, and the next day I'm going to prepare. This 3-day work week, that may not have been a great example, but because filmmaking is just kind of this weird thing where it's always a little bit fluid. But that 3-day work week window, let's take a design perspective to it. So let's just say you're building, it could be a landing page, it could be a website, it could be a logo, something a little bit more just like, here's a couple hours, knock something out, and kind of like iterate on it as time goes on. So if you're looking for like kind of that first design sprint, so to speak, you kind of spend some time just kind of getting the creative juices flowing. It's almost like warming up a vehicle, like an old school ice vehicle. It's like warming it up before driving in cold weather. You want to allow it to kind of get some reps in warming up. And if you're not in a creative mindset, it's harder to get that engine going. And so how do you really get the engine going? And it's get inspired by something. Like watch something that's inspiring, talk to somebody that's inspiring, make food that's inspiring, go outside and go for a walk and be inspired by nature. Like there's so many different ways that you can kind of get inspired, even by the smallest things. Like a little bit of a side tangent, but I'm a huge fan of macro photography and film. I just think seeing the things that are small, large is fascinating to me because it's the things that we don't see. And so when you specifically look at, you could take like ants and on a log kind of thing and just super close up, there's so much happening at that level of nature that we just honestly, just on a walk, we walk right by, but there's so much going on down there. And it just kind of inspires you to think like, wow, how much is going on in all these other places where I'm not paying attention to? And now all of a sudden your creative brain is starting to kind of take over. And that's kind of the goal of everything. It's when it's time to be creative, be in the most creative state you can possibly be. When it's time to be analytical, be in the most analytical state that you can be. And when it's time to kind of take inventory and be kind of like objective on your business, so to speak, of like, hey, how did I perform as a person and how do I want to improve, or how did my business do? And is this sustainable for the business? Like, that's another mindset that you want to be in. And so preparing for these mindsets are actually pretty important, because I think now we're stuck in this social media side of things and marketing side of things and AI side of things where everything is just moving so quickly. And so I don't know if you felt this way, but the way that I kind of see it is you get something on your desk and you're like, okay, how quickly can I get this done? And then, move it off the desk so I can get the next thing, because more stuff's coming at me and more stuff, and everything is more and more and more. And while we are moving at an accelerated pace, and I think it's a really important time for people to kind of be really thoughtful about how they spend their time, a little bit more creative on how efficient that they could possibly be with their time, it doesn't take away from the need to actually concentrate on a deep level on the task at hand. And I think that we've lost that kind of idea of presence in a moment, and whether that be creative or analytical or kind of just admin-y type of stuff in the business. When we really approach things with more of this idea of I am now focused wholly on this one thing, call it almost the time blocking concept, but not in throughout the entire day, you kind of realize your work ends up getting a lot better in all areas. You realize data points that you didn't necessarily realize were actually affecting the work that you were doing. You realize maybe a process that you could have done a lot better. And then when you're actually creating something, maybe you realize a way that you could do it completely differently. That opens up an entire world of doing things that makes it inherently unique. That's the heart of creativity. And so I don't really think that, necessarily going to like a 3-day work week, to kind of tie it back to the beginning, 3-day work week is necessarily the best call. But in a 3-day type of rhythm, I think you can make more progress than doing a 5-day stretch and 2 days off. And so I always look at things almost in, like, I believe you should have a day off, yes. But I think that when you're in a creative state and you're kind of working on stuff that you're excited about, your brain's going to kind of be working in the background anyway, whether you're actively paying attention to it or not. So if you were to take a normal work week of 7 days, your Monday, okay, cool. You may be let's take a perfect week, not a weird one. Perfect week. You kind of start out, you're planning what you got to accomplish in that next day from a creative sprint perspective. You kind of make sure everything's dialed, your direction is good, team members are on board, you kind of know exactly what you want to do. Tuesday, you execute on that, full-blown creativity. Like, that's the fun part. You go all in on it. You don't have to worry about anything else. You just focus on that part. And then the next day, analyze, take in everything, what worked, what didn't, and then go to the next day, and now you're going to prepare for the next day of creativity. So now you're on Thursday. So Wednesday was your kind of like analytical day. Let's figure out what worked, what didn't. Thursday, you're going to be creating again, and then you're preparing. Then Friday, you're going to analyze again. And so you just have this like 3-day cycle that's just going to consistently go. And it ends up being where you take, call it 1 day off, and it could be a different day each week, but this kind of approach of like shorter stints, but more effort and or more concentrated effort, I think is more effective than just dragging out this idea of, 5 straight days and let's just see if we can make it through the week. Like that part is just not exciting for anybody. Like, nobody really wants to do that. And the more that we can kind of practice this concentrated effort, I actually think you get pretty far. I mean, book's a little bit older now at this point, but I mean, Tim Ferriss wrote this book called 4-Hour Workweek, and this was quite a while ago, but the guy's kind of a legend. He was just kind of this concept of, could you do all of your work in 4 hours for the entire week? There was a lot of subtlety in that, and it was a little bit of like a hook to get people to, kind of look at things a bit differently. But the brilliance of it was this idea of, if you have a focused, kind of goal-oriented way to accomplish goals, and you don't allow distractions in, you don't allow all the things that people say you should do, you shouldn't do, and try this and try that. If you kind of block all that out and you just get after it, what could you possibly do? And then also coming at things with more of a systems mindset. So how can you build something that then you can build 10 different things on top of that rather than doing one and then the next and then the next. And so I figured I wanted to walk through really what does this look like in a practical way. So let's take like a proper week where you've got to really kind of go about your task in a really organized manner. Like there's not a lot of time to kind of figure things out on the go. Like one of the things that I've been noticing lately is that I have to be very conscious of my time. How much time is something going to take? And will that be enough time to move on to that next thing? And that could be a whole host of things that cause that. It could be that life is just busy at work at the moment. It could be that you want to spend a lot more time with your family, which I love to do. It could be that you want to spend more time exercising because the sun's out a little bit more. It could be that you want to learn a new skill or a new talent or a new hobby that you didn't necessarily do beforehand. Where do you find the time for that? Well, I mean, first, probably cut out some of the social media stuff. If you've already done that, good job. But if you've already cut that out, time becomes this really hard thing to manipulate because especially as you get busier or more advanced in your career or I guess build a more full life, if you will, where you have a lot of different things kind of happening that bring you fulfillment, time becomes the thing you pay most attention to. And budgeting your time is all about prioritization. So like number one, like what is the most important thing that you have to accomplish that day that's going to push you farther down the road, and then basing everything from that. And so I always take like, what's the big goal of the day? And that's like the main block of the day. So in a lot of cases that might be work. And then that's separated into kind of your, is it analytical? Is it creative? Is it, whatever that may be. That's your big block of the day. And then what's the next priority that you got to put in there? Well, the next priority is probably going to be something around taking care of yourself, taking care of your family, any other obligatory stuff that you kind of would need to stack on top of that as well. Like, oh, I got to make food for the next day. Like just get those things kind of dialed and then know, how long is it going to take to approximately do each one? And this isn't to be so systematized. I think like over the years, my calendar's done a couple different things. So for one, I've had calendars where it's like Monday is, 8 to 9 is this, 9 to 10 is this, 10:15 to 10:45 is that. And it's just like this really stacked schedule. And they're not all, meetings with people or things that actually have a timeline. I'm just like, at this time, I'm going to do this time, I'm going to do that. And then I sit down, and this goes back to kind of that creative, analytical mindset type of conversation. Then I sit down and I go, oh man, that's going to take me a little bit to shift into that analytical mode in those gears. And that's when I realized that what the day involves and how you plan out your day is also important as to what category it's living in. Because the shifting the gears, and this is the point that I wanted to get to, the shifting of the gears between the creative mindset, the analytical mindset, and I'd say the planning mindset's kind of a mix of the two. That's a really hard shift to make. Like it's really hard to be super creative in one way and then just like, shift the gears and hop into some other thing that, your brain's not necessarily prepared for, kind of warmed up in. It takes a little bit of time to warm it up. And so when you're looking to prioritize those things you got to do in a day, make sure it's in one of those categories of what you got to accomplish, of what that bulk is of the day, because it'll make that shifting a lot easier. Like I've found myself before, working on a really deep creative task and then an analytical task and then some sort of planning task. And then by the end of the day, when I look forward to the most to spend time with my family, I'll be like just still trying to deprocess my brain and get it into that state of like, okay, what mode am I in now? And that kind of shifting sucks, to be honest. Like you want it to be a little bit more, okay, now it is family time. And like be able to just like leave the rest of the stuff at the door. And that it's always a practicing thing. Like the more we can practice that, the better. And I'm trying to get better at it. I always will try to get better at it. But the most important part is knowing what kind of gear you're in and then making those shifts accordingly, or planning out the time where if you do have some sort of day where you got to do hardcore creative stuff and then hop on over to more analytical stuff. Allow time in there to warm up the brain properly, because the reason why I bring that up is you could spend all of this time just kind of focused on, whatever the task is, and on to the next, on to the next. But when you look on a long enough timeline, the quality of the result usually isn't quite as good as it could be if you were fully engaged in it, fully warmed up. It's the same thing as being a really talented athlete, but if you don't train for the sport, you're not going to be at the top. It's the same exact thing. It's that dedicated time actually makes a difference in the quality of the product at the end of the day. So this is like, it could be 5 years down the road, 10 years, 2 years, like doesn't much matter. It's a long enough timeline, not necessarily that day. So you can get through every day if you're switching gears that often, but at least in my experience, I find out after probably 5 months of just absolute grinding like that, you kind of reach a bit of a breaking point where you need at least a few days, but also you're just exhausted. And that doesn't help anybody. And so the more you can kind of stay at the steady state, and sure, some days are a little bit more tiring than others, but in general, the brain isn't switching so much that it's trying to, just kind of keep up with you. It'll make things a little bit easier to navigate, a little bit more simple to kind of take on some of the challenging things that would normally tire you out a lot faster. And so it just kind of makes everything, I don't want to say easier, but kind of. So that would be my challenge would be, see what working more intentionally in terms of days could look like. Could you take a day where you're wholly focused on a task and you can block out the emails, the admin-y stuff that we normally are kind of doing every day? Some of them kind of do have to be done. Like if there's critical communication in your company or something like that, fair enough. But in general, there's always a way where you can say, look, today I am headphone time and I am just knocking these things out and just kind of dive right in. I think that's the secret sauce, is to be able to know where you can kind of perform at your best, but protect your time. And you hear a lot from the very successful, the wealthy and all that kind of stuff. They say like, oh, protect your time and time. And maybe it took a little bit to truly understand it, because I used to think, oh, well, just the time of not giving it to other people necessarily, of like pulling your time, is the bad thing. But it's really how you spend your time as a person is what makes a huge difference. And I don't mean successful in terms of wealth necessarily. It's just those that have found complete joy and fulfillment in whatever they do in life. Most will say protect your time because that's the only thing you have. And I think they might be right. Until next week.